The sun hung low over the Kenyan savanna, casting long amber shadows across the golden grasses that rustled with the breeze. In the distance, Mount Kilimanjaro stood silent and unmoved, its snowy peak a distant reminder of nature's grandeur. Below, in the wide stretches of Tsavo National Park, the earth pulsed with life. Herds moved like water, zebras in neat lines, gazelles bounding through open spaces, and elephants, mighty, deliberate, and wise, traveling with purpose. Naya, the matriarch of her elephant herd, led the way. Her tusks were long and slightly chipped from decades of defending and guiding her family. At nearly 50 years old, she had seen droughts, floods, wildfires, and births. She had mourned lost calves and rejoiced at new life. Her ears, wide and creased like old parchment, twitched as she listened to the low rumbles of her herd behind her. They followed in calm silence, young calves nestled between mothers, a few rowdy juveniles tossing trunkfuls of dust playfully at one another. Naya paused at a waterhole that shimmered under the setting sun. The mud at its edges was thick, soft, and dangerous. As elephants began to drink and bathe, she raised her head sharply. Something wasn't right. She heard it, not a call from her herd, not a bird or hyena, but a desperate, high-pitched cry. Faint but filled with fear. It was coming from beyond a thicket of acacias. Her ears perked again. Another cry, not one of her own. It was the sound of a child, but not an elephant calf. With a deep rumble that stopped the others mid-drink, Naya turned toward the trees. The herd followed slowly, sensing her urgency. The calls grew louder as they approached, frantic, weak, and muffled. Then, just past the brush, they saw it. A baby rhino. He couldn't have been more than a few months old. Alone, covered in mud, struggling in a shallow pit that had once been a waterhole but now sat as a thick, sticky trap of sun-baked clay. The calf's legs flailed in slow motion, stuck up to his belly. Each movement pulled him deeper. His tiny horn was just starting to grow, and his ears flicked in panic. He cried out again, the sound cracking with exhaustion. Naya stood frozen. She looked around. No adult rhino in sight. No signs of predators, not yet. But if a lion or hyena picked up that sound, they'd come fast. A lone rhino calf was an easy target. Naya's massive foot lifted, then paused. This was not her kind. This was not her responsibility. And yet, the calf cried again. Behind her, the youngest elephants of the herd stepped closer, curious and wide-eyed. Naya let out a low rumble, one that spoke of warning but also concern. She approached the edge of the pit cautiously. The ground around it squished with each step. She leaned over and extended her trunk toward the calf, gently brushing his muddy head. The rhino stopped struggling. His eyes, dark and glossy, met hers. For a moment, he was silent. Then he let out a low, mournful sound, something between a squeal and a sob. Naya pulled back. The herd behind her stirred, unsure what to do. One of the younger females, a new mother named Paula, stepped forward. Her own calf, still nursing, hid beneath her massive body. Paula looked at Naya, then at the rhino, then back. Her trunk wrapped protectively around her calf, but her eyes were full of empathy. Naya turned to her herd. She let out a sequence of deep rumbles and trunk gestures, communication only elephants understood. It was a command, but also a plea. Help him. The elephants began to gather around the pit, moving carefully. Their great feet tested the mud's edge. 2 juveniles tried to use their trunks to pull at the baby, but he was stuck tight. Paula stepped forward again and tried to nudge him with her tusk, gently, just enough to break the suction of the thick earth. The calf squealed in alarm. Naya moved beside Paula and lowered herself, trunk reaching again. This time, she wrapped it beneath the baby's belly and pulled, gently, steadily. The calf shifted slightly, his legs kicking. The mud clung to him like glue. Naya grunted with the effort and let go. They needed a plan. She raised her trunk and trumpeted loudly, sending a message that echoed across the plains. It startled birds from nearby trees and caused a pair of giraffes to freeze mid-step. Far off, in the distance, something moved in the tall grass. A flicker of gray. Another rhino? No. It was just a wildebeest herd, spooked by the noise. The elephants tried again. This time, 3 of them, Naya, Paula, and a younger bull named Ashan, coordinated. Naya wrapped her trunk around the calf's midsection, Paula dug at the mud near the calf's back legs, and Ashan pushed with his forehead at the pit's rim to loosen the soil. The baby bleated in panic, but the mud shifted. Then, a slip. Paula's foot sank deep. She trumpeted and stumbled backward, barely regaining her balance. Naya let go immediately. They all backed away. Too dangerous. The sun had dipped below the horizon now. The sky glowed in shades of purple and orange, and insects buzzed thick in the cooling air. The baby rhino whimpered and closed his eyes for a moment, too tired to cry anymore. Naya stood over him protectively, shielding him with her bulk. The herd formed a loose circle around them. Not one of them moved to leave. They would not walk away from this. That night, as the stars began to bloom overhead, Naya stayed awake, watching the shadows and listening to the distant howls and chirps of the night. Her herd slept in intervals, but she remained near the baby rhino, who now rested with his head pressed against the cool earth, half submerged in drying mud. Somewhere, a lion roared. Naya turned her ears and took a step closer to the pit. She placed one massive foot down with a thud and raised her trunk toward the sky. She would not let him die. The next day, the herd would try again, with more force, with more coordination. They were elephants. Ancient, wise, and bound not just by family, but by an unspoken code of care. They knew pain. They knew loss. And this little creature, though not their own, was alone. And that was reason enough. The sky broke with the soft light of dawn, brushing pale gold across the savannah. Naya had not slept. She stood like a statue beside the pit, eyes alert, trunk occasionally brushing against the baby rhino to check that he was still breathing. The calf stirred as the morning warmth touched his muddy back. His small ears flicked. He raised his head and let out a weak squeal, less of panic now, more of aching exhaustion. But he was alive. Paula approached quietly, her own calf trailing sleepily behind. The two mothers touched trunks in greeting. Paula looked down at the pit and rumbled softly, "He made it through the night." Naya nodded. "But the lions are coming." She had heard them in the dark. Their calls were closer than before, haunting the edge of the grasslands like ghosts. She knew the rhythms of predators well. By morning, they would be near. The herd was waking now, slowly at first, then with growing awareness of the urgency in their matriarch's stance. Ashan, the young bull, trumpeted to the rising sun, scattering a flock of guinea fowl. The younger elephants huddled closer to their mothers, sensing the mood. The mud pit was drier than yesterday. The top crust had hardened slightly under the sun, but beneath it, the soil still clung like quicksand. Naya tested it with her foot. It cracked and sank slightly but felt more stable than before. She looked at Ashan. He understood instantly. Together, they began again. This time, Naya stood at the baby rhino's head while Ashan moved behind. Paula returned with two other cows, Juno and Kira, both strong, both experienced. Naya led the coordination with low rumbles, directing each move as if conducting a silent orchestra. Ashan began by using his tusks to dig into the mud behind the calf, loosening the thick soil. Kira and Paula flanked the sides, shifting the ground at the edges. Naya reached into the pit with her trunk and curled it around the calf's chest. The baby squealed, his legs kicked feebly. Naya gave a tug. He moved slightly. Again, she rumbled. Ashan pushed harder, and Naya pulled. A slurping noise echoed through the clearing. The calf's hind legs were visible now, coated in mud. Paula leaned in, wrapping her trunk around one leg. She pulled. Another tug, more movement. Then suddenly, a loud crack. The earth beneath Ashan gave way. He dropped with a thud, his front legs sinking into a fresh hole at the pit's rim. The other elephants backed away in alarm. Naya shouted a warning blast with her trunk, her voice echoing across the plains. Ashan thrashed, his massive body kicking up clouds of dust and clumps of soil. But he was strong. With a grunt, he pulled himself free, rising with mud caked on his chest and tusks. He looked at Naya. "I'm fine." Naya lowered her head, grateful. But the danger was growing. The ground was unpredictable. Suddenly, a breeze carried a new scent across the field: meat, hunger, death. Naya turned sharply. Across the grassland, half hidden in shadow, 3 lionesses had appeared. They crouched low, tails twitching, eyes locked on the scene. Behind them, 2 younger males followed at a distance, testing the wind. They saw the baby rhino. Naya trumpeted, long and loud. The lions paused. The herd turned as one, forming a wall of wrinkled gray muscle around the pit. Calves were pushed to the center. The young ones trembled but did not flee. The lions waited. They were no match for the full force of the herd, not yet, but they would watch. And they would wait. Naya returned to the baby. His eyes were wide, and his body trembled, but he was still trying. Still moving. Still alive. She reached for him again. This time, Paula and Kira supported her, trunks ready. Ashan stood behind, keeping watch. The herd remained tense but still, unmoving defenders. Naya wrapped her trunk around the calf's chest again, firmer now, deeper. She rumbled to him, a low sound that soothed the earth. The calf let out a huff of breath and stilled. "Hold on," she seemed to say. She pulled. He groaned. The mud made a sound like a tearing cloth. She pulled again, harder. Then, suddenly, with a final heave, he came free. The baby rhino flopped onto the dirt, coated in thick, cracked mud. His legs kicked as he gasped for air. Naya let out a great trumpet of triumph that echoed like thunder. The herd joined her, raising their trunks skyward in a symphony of celebration. But they weren't done yet. The lions had moved closer, drawn by the commotion. Naya stepped over the calf and spread her ears wide. Her presence was monumental. The lions hesitated, but they didn't back off. Ashan lowered his tusks and made a show of strength, stomping and tossing dust into the air. Paula and Kira flanked Naya on either side. The younger elephants trumpeted in panic, but the formation held. Then the baby rhino, shaky on his legs, tried to stand. He stumbled. Naya moved behind him and gently nudged him with her trunk. He stood again, this time more steadily. His small chest heaved with breath. He looked around, dazed, but saw the lions too. He took a step, then another, then collapsed again. Naya touched his back gently. The lions watched. They inched forward. And then, from behind a distant rise, a shape moved. A full-grown white rhino. Broad, heavy, and scarred with age, the mother emerged like a tank of living muscle. Her horn was chipped, and her skin was torn in places from bramble and battle. She moved with slow, heavy steps, snorting with fury. She had followed the trumpets. She had followed the scent of her child. The lions froze. The mother rhino saw her calf, mud-covered, trembling, and charged. The elephants parted slightly, giving her a path. Naya stepped back, watching her warily but with understanding. The rhino mother reached her calf and snorted deeply, nudging him. The baby chirped weakly in response. She circled him, checking for wounds, and then turned to the lions, her eyes full of rage. The lions backed away. 5 against 2, elephants and rhino together. It was no contest. The predators melted into the brush. Silence returned. The mother rhino lowered her head and pressed it gently to her calf. The baby squealed softly and pressed his face into her chest. Naya watched for a long moment, then turned and rumbled to her herd. It was time to leave. As the elephants turned to go, the rhino mother raised her head and met Naya's eyes. For a breathless moment, 2 mothers, so different, yet so alike, stood watching one another in the dust and dawn. No words, no sounds, but between them, a message passed. "Thank you." Naya dipped her head and turned away. The herd followed her, their bodies moving like ancient ships across the golden plains. Behind them, the baby rhino lay beside his mother, safe at last. 3 weeks had passed since the rescue. The savannah, bathed in the copper warmth of a late afternoon sun, shimmered with life. Wildebeest herds grazed quietly beneath acacia trees. Giraffes stretched their necks toward tender leaves. And somewhere beyond a cluster of rocky outcrops, the wind carried the low, rolling trumpet of elephants. Naya stood at the edge of a waterhole, her reflection rippling on the surface. Her herd had settled for the day, calves splashing in the shallows, older bulls bathing in the deeper end. Dust clung to her skin in patches, a tapestry of her journeys. She was older now, not in years, but in weight. Not the weight of fatigue, but of memory. She gazed into the distance. And then, from the trees beyond the watering hole, came a rustle, then a heavy thud. She turned. Across the cracked ground, 2 figures emerged from the brush. The baby rhino. Bigger now, steadier, still scarred, but thriving. And beside him, his mother. The herd quieted. A hush fell over the elephants as the pair approached. Calves stopped splashing. Even Ashan lowered his head in recognition. The mother rhino paused a few paces away. She grunted softly, nudging her child forward. The young rhino hesitated, then walked. 1 step, then 2. His little tail flicked as he moved closer to the towering elephant matriarch. Naya remained still, her gaze steady, but her ears twitched slightly, a sign of interest. The baby rhino came to a stop in front of her, lifted his head, and chirped. A small, uncertain, whistling squeak. Naya lowered her massive head and gently, ever so gently, touched her trunk to his back. A greeting, a blessing, a memory rekindled. The rhino's mother rumbled from behind, a sound full of gratitude. It was rougher than an elephant's voice, more gravel than song, but it carried weight. Respect. The baby circled Naya once, inspecting her with curiosity and warmth, before retreating to his mother's side. Then the pair turned and walked back the way they came, leaving only their footprints in the dry soil. The moment passed, but it rippled like a stone dropped in a still pond. Later that evening, as twilight spread across the sky and stars blinked awake one by one, the elephants gathered beneath an ancient baobab tree. They formed a loose circle, calves nestled between mothers, the elderly resting on bent legs. The air smelled of dust and wood smoke from distant villages. Paula, standing beside Naya, spoke first. They came back. Naya nodded slowly. Yes. They didn't need to. No, Naya agreed. But they remembered. Ashan rumbled from the other side of the circle. Will he stay near us now? The calf? Maybe, Naya said. Or maybe he'll grow to lead his own. But he'll know. He'll remember that not every giant is a threat. And not every stranger walks away. Silence settled. Then, Kira, ever curious, asked softly, "Why did you help him, Naya? Why risk the herd?" The matriarch looked toward the stars. For the same reason we protect our calves. Because the plains are not kind. Because kindness is rare. And because once, long ago, someone helped me. The younger elephants leaned closer. What happened? One of the calves asked. Naya's eyes shimmered in the starlight. When I was small, I fell behind. I got lost during a stampede. The herd was scattered by thunder and fire, bushfires, I know now. I cried through the night, alone. What saved you? A buffalo, she said simply. An old one, blind in one eye. He stayed beside me until the sun rose. He didn't speak, but he stood guard all night. When the herd found me, he just turned and walked away. The calves were silent. I never forgot him, she whispered. So I stood beside the rhino. Because someone once stood beside me. The wind shifted, brushing cool across the plains. The trees creaked softly. In the distance, a lion roared, not with hunger, but as a statement of presence. Life pulsed through every corner of the savannah, and the elephants listened. They understood something deep and eternal now, something passed not through words, but through actions. In the following weeks, stories spread. Not just through elephant herds or rhino paths, but among the zebras, the warthogs, the giraffes and the ostriches. They told it in chirps, snorts, rustles, and glances. About the matriarch who saved the rhino. About the day the giants stood side by side. And the story grew. Some said the rhino calf now followed the elephants at a distance, like a shadow in the tall grass. Others whispered that predators kept clear of Naya's herd, out of respect, or fear. But most simply said, the plains had changed that day. Because compassion had walked there. And it had left footprints in the dust. One evening, months later, under the full moon, Naya stood alone on a ridge. Below her, the savannah stretched in silver waves. Behind her, the herd slept. She heard a sound, a gentle snort. She turned. The rhino calf stood behind her again. Taller now, stronger, no longer trembling. His horn had begun to grow. He looked up at her. She gave a soft rumble and stepped aside. He stood beside her, their shadows blending in the moonlight. And together, they watched the world. A matriarch, and the calf she once saved. Side by side.